It's a no-brainer to me. Superflex and Kyler Murray is readily available? What is happening? One of the hottest topics across Dynasty fantasy football are players you should be buying in the offseason. It's early, but that does not mean we have to sit aside and watch the rest of our league mates make a bunch of trades that you could have been ahead on. This video is powered by the FantasyPoints data suite. Let's dive right into players that you should be buying in Dynasty early in 2025.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Before we kick off our list of the 5 players I'm going to talk about today, you should know that you could head to FantasyPoints.com and use our early bird special to get yourself locked in for the 2025 fantasy season to get all of our wonderful content from Dynasty to redraft to betting. You name it, we have it. Also grants you access to the private channels in Discord. You can do all of that at FantasyPoints.com. That link will be in the description. First player we're going to talk about is T. Higgins. I do not think T. Higgins should be or will be readily available in your leagues, but we should absolutely be trying. T. Higgins this year finished with 18.6 points per game on a 17.7 expected fantasy points per game. That is good for 6th and 5th, respectively. He was good enough to do this with 0 design targets. The only other wide receiver in the top 12 for expected fantasy points per game this year with fewer than 14 design targets was Little Points Drake London. He had 2. Don't want expected fantasy points? How about points per game? Amon-Ra St. Brown, 12. Mike Evans, 1. A.J. Brown, 0. Chris Godwin, 12. That is pretty good company. What makes design touches matter to me is that it shows that T. Higgins can play as a prototype X wide receiver. These wide receivers garner a lot of attention on the free agent market. He just finished his franchise tag season in Cincinnati. No one knows if they're going to find the money for such a cheap franchise to bring T. Higgins back, regardless of what Joe Burrow believes. Now, I think his best destination is Cincinnati, but should he wind up somewhere with a Drake May, his ADP, his value should actually get a boost. And as you can see here from Dynasty Data Labs, as I'm recording this, current ADP of wide receiver 16. That to me is an absolute smash pick. We're talking about a guy that could be your 2nd or 3rd wide receiver, depending on how you build your rosters in startups. He's definitely a must grab. And you're thinking, well, what about my league that exists already? Well, don't worry, we have you covered with that already. You see, it's very rare that we get a player with an elite range of outcomes that's 26 years old, who, as I mentioned, just finished 6th and 5th in points per game and expected fantasy points per game. And it's rare that we get them outside of the top 12. But as the trades from Dynasty Daddy will tell you, it's not only possible that he's available, but the cost does not reflect his production. You normally have to pay double these prices for a potential top 5, at least a top 10 wide receiver, somebody who was already previously in the top 12 of Dynasty rankings across the industry. He is most definitely a buy. Now, T. Higgins does carry some injury risk with his hamstrings that seem to take after the great Will Fuller's love for the injured list. But T. Higgins with a healthy quarterback all year. Last time that happened was in 2021, where he was again top 12 in points per game with a 15.7. T. Higgins is my number 1 must-have wide receiver. He is worth the price. Next up for me is another wide receiver, and let me introduce you to one who broke out in a big way this year. I was an absolute doubter. Massive contract. It's Jerry Jeudy, still going after the 6th round, after a full-on breakout. You can see on Keep Trade Cut, I still think he is massively undervalued. See, Jerry Jeudy came on strong this year, especially in the post-Amari Cooper era. And from week 8 on, Jeudy only had 3 games with under 8 targets. He averaged 10.2 targets per game, third only behind rookie sensation Malik Neighbors in Jamar Chase. And with those targets, he finished 9th with a very nice receptions of 69, second in yards per game, only behind Jamar Chase with 96.3. Jeudy was third in the league with a 37.5% of his team's yardage share. His 18.5 points per game over that stretch was 7th in the league. And his 17.4 expected fantasy points per game was right in line with Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb. This is a true breakout season for Jeudy, who is still currently, at the time of recording this, 25 years old. A majority of it did come with Winston, but you see Jeudy caught passes from Winston, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, and New England Patriots legend Bailey Zappi, as well as obviously Deshaun Watson. Even though Jerry Jeudy only had 1 game above 14 points without Jameis, this team undoubtedly will be looking to make an upgrade at the quarterback position. They have to. Deshaun Watson tore his Achilles for the 2nd time in this offseason. And in those 3 games without Winston, it's not like they didn't try. He averaged over 10 targets per game over the final 3 games the Cleveland Browns played. You can see on Dynasty Data Lab, with a breakout like this, we expected his price to go up from wide receiver 54, which is what he had from what I call the major draft season, May to August in 2024. It was the 12th round for Jerry Jeudy, and you'd be right. His price did go up, but he's only gone up to wide receiver 32 in the 8th round. There's a real life chance that Jerry Jeudy can be your wide receiver 5 on some teams when you are drafting. It is a blessing at this rate to have that kind of depth, especially in a year like this year where depth mattered so much. Imagine Jerry Jeudy, your 3rd, 4th flex. Insane value on Jerry Jeudy right now, depending on your roster construction. Now, as you can see, for trades, I'm absolutely prioritizing Jerry Jeudy in wide receiver heavy leagues, especially. The offense is going to change the firing of Ken Dorsey, but with a breakout like this, it would be so difficult for a coaching staff starved for offensive talent, especially with let's face it, the career of Nick Chubb possibly coming to an end in Cleveland. What we do know is that Jerry Jeudy, like I said, he got his contract, and it is really hard to put that kind of production back in the bag. I think I've identified a running back right now who's entirely too cheap. J.K. Dobbins was great in his first year in LA, reunited with his Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator, Greg Roman. He finished with 14.8 points per game on a 14 expected fantasy points per game at 26 years old. I don't think anybody expected this kind of production out of J.K. Dobbins, and yet he is still undervalued. He had a career year with 905 rushing yards, 32 receptions on, again, a career high 38 targets. And he does carry some injury risk, but he flashed some of the speed and explosiveness from his rookie season with a 5.1 explosive run rate, putting him in the top 12 for running backs in the NFL with a minimum of 150 carries. On the year, he had 296 total explosive yards. That was good for 32.7% of his yardage on the season. Again, Keep Trade Cut wants to tell you he is a value. I here am agreeing. The other running backs on the roster didn't show much in terms of production in Dobbins' time away, with no backs providing more than Gus Edwards' 9.1 points per game, boosted by 3 touchdowns in that span. He was losing work to Hassan Haskins and Twitter favorite Kamani Vidal. Not to mention, the game that Dobbins got injured was against his former team, the Baltimore Ravens, and in that first half, he was unstoppable. With the trades here we found at Dynasty Daddy, running backs can be risky to buy in the offseason, but at these prices, I'm willing to take the risk on a potential RB2 with an RB1 upside on a week-to-week basis. He should earn himself a new contract with the Chargers. That, of course, is the best case scenario. He is for sure going to earn a contract this coming year, especially having another year post injury to get a little healthier, to get a little faster. In a league where every running back seems to get hurt on average, it is good to, again, have depth. There's one running back I'm willing to bet on. It is J.K. Dobbins. As for tight end, this is one of the more challenging positions to predict. The size, speed favorites can take years to develop. These slow, less explosive players are often looked down upon, and blocking is becoming more and more important as the league shifts to a little bit more rush friendly thanks to the dreaded too high shell looks. The NFL is an adapt or die league, and teams are adapting. Your tight end had better be able to block. There are a lot of cheap options this year, but I got to admit, tight end kind of stinky right now, early in 2025. But there's one specifically I am interested in, and it is Ja'Tavion Sanders. The Panthers offense took off again once Bryce Young was taken out of timeout thanks to a fender bender to Andy Dalton, who was, for all fantasy purposes, playing well. But in the 2 games Sanders played with Young before the Week 11 bye week, Sanders dropped 15.45 and 9.8 fantasy points in 0.5 tight end premium leagues. From weeks 5 through 10, the start of Sanders' first 75% snap share game, he had games of 12.4, 15.1, 14.7 tight end premium fantasy points, with one game under 10 in that span. 10 to me is the number you want to hope for week in and week out. That's if you get 10 points from your tight end position and it's not an elite player, you are feeling pretty good. Not like they really let you down. Sanders showed that he could not only excel, but he looked good doing it. Sadly, an injury did slow him the rest of the year. Landing on his head, landing on his neck, it was a little scary, but he did come back. Another thing that really slowed him down the rest of the way was that Tommy Tremble did come back. There is a small Tommy Tremble problem. He only hit 60% route share once in Tremble's healthy games, but Tremble is an unrestricted free agent at the end of the year, so there could be a world where Tremble does not come back and Sanders earns himself a larger role. And if he does, I think he is going to smash. This is an offense that was predicted to struggle, and it did struggle. It bounced back in a big way. I am very in on Sanders. Tight end 20 costs in startups. And as trade prices, I'm attacking these trades, but I'm also trying to more so get Sanders thrown in as a toss-in piece, a kind of forgotten about piece. He is not somebody I want to pay at a premium price in case this does not work out, but I definitely want him on my rosters one way or another. And I think these trades here are a sign that it is definitely possible. Before we move on, I did want to note there was a bonus tight end that I debated talking about. It is Noah Gray. I've been heavily invested in Noah Gray for the last few seasons, and it might finally really pay off. Gray is under contract after getting an extension. He is currently tight end 26 on startup boards this month. Should Kelsey actually retire? If Kelsey actually retires, even if it is unlikely, there's a real chance Gray will step right in to that role, and we know how good that role can be. Gray set career highs across the board with 49 targets, 40 receptions, 437 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's just 25 years old. You should be clicking him in every draft without a doubt. The last player we're going to talk about today is a little controversial, but if you've been tuning into the Dynasty Points Market Report podcast, my co-host Andy Buckler made some really good points on Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is definitely a player that people have started to sour on. He has reached a point where he is a massive value. He's being drafted as a QB2. Now we are cheating here a little bit, but we'll take it. He's QB 13. And you can see from some of the more recent trades on Dynasty Daddy, Kyler Murray is very much available in Superflex tight end premium leagues. A profile like Kyler is challenging to pass up on, even on a down year. See, he managed 500 yards rushing, something he hadn't done since 2020, primarily due to just him remaining healthy for an entire season, which he hadn't done since 2020. It kind of adds up. He managed to be top 15 in fantasy points per dropback at 0.51, and again, top 15 in fantasy points per opportunity. He also finished as the QB 12 in points per game, tied with Patrick Mahomes, who's going in the first round. Issues with the offensive line and the round one wide receiver from last year, Marvin Harrison Jr., and of course, Trey McBride's allergic reaction to the end zone all left a lot to be desired in 2024. But at the end of the season, the Cardinals found a way to get their true wide receiver one into the end zone on back-to-back weeks, ending the season on a high note, offensively averaging 22.8 points per game over Kyler Murray's final 3 games. You can see by the draft board, Kyler Murray is most definitely a buy in drafts. There are few, if any, profiles like Kyler after the 3rd round outside of rookie picks that could produce a rushing upside quarterback like Kyler Murray. But we know what Kyler Murray is and has been, and now he's going to be a year healthier. He is the perfect quarterback to pair with somebody like J.J. McCarthy or Bryce Young in round 5 or even Tua in round 6. And at those prices, if you've already drafted a McCarthy or Bryce Young, and maybe you have an older quarterback too, and Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers is not working out, go and pay the price needed to get yourself some more Kyler Murray on your rosters for 2025. It's a no-brainer to me. Superflex and Kyler Murray is readily available? What is happening? Anyway, that's going to do it. Those are 6 players that I have dug up as buys for the 2025 fantasy season. If you're a Dynasty degenerate like us, be sure to catch Dynasty Points live Tuesday night at 9:30 Eastern. Podcast release first thing in the morning every Wednesday. And of course, the Dynasty Points Market Report podcast goes live every Saturday morning through the off season on the Dynasty Points podcast feed. Be tapped in for more Dynasty content here at FantasyPoints.com. Hit the like and subscribe if you like the video, and leave a comment and let me know who you think is the biggest Dynasty buy. Remember that clear eyes and full hearts can never lose, and your best days, they're always spent tilting. Good night, everybody.